Hello, everyone, and welcome to Inspiring Boys, Empowering Fathers, and Transforming Lives. This is going to be a part two of what we talked about last time, why it's such a difficult time to be a boy. Good morning, Jim.
Good morning, Linda. Yes, it is a tough time to be a boy, a tough time to be a boy growing up, it's a tough time to be a man too. So, this is particularly important that these items that we're talking about now, very important.
Yes, it is. And just as a reminder of what we talked about, this is part two, but what we talked about last time was that in the 1980s, education system focused on girls because girls were running behind. And to make things equal between boys and girls, the education system started to focus more on girls. And unfortunately, the way it was done, it led to a lot of unintended consequences for boys. So we have swung the other way, and our boys now need support. They are now falling behind significantly in literacy, which, as Jim has talked about many times, um, literacy is a driver for everything. It's a driver for success in any future, any job, anything you do. So by doing this, this is what's happened to boys, and we continue to demean them, creating lower expectations. We've talked about last time we talked about it, that's not just in school, but in TV and social media and in society. And the problem with that is boys end up having lower academics, which is what we're here to talk about, really, the education system and what boys need. And with the lower academics, that affects their self-esteem. And dads and parents accept what the school system tells them that their boy's not doing well. And so they start to lower their expectations for their sons. And then that just, spirals down into underachievement. And this is what happens. So
As
today,
our expectations for boys are reduced, the boys' expectation for themselves is also reduced. So yeah, it is self-fulfilling. There's no doubt about it.
definitely. So we're going to get into part two today. And here's where we're starting. What are the challenges of boyhood today? What are the things that are causing problems for boys? Well, the research shows that there's the boys have the ability, but what's happening is the social and institutional factors that are really contributing to the higher rates of underachievement among boys versus what's happening in girls.
And, and
Um,
and we have to recognize that when we use the term underachievement, we're talking about people not reaching their capabilities. We're not talking about somehow boys now have fewer skills or anything. It's the reality is that they're simply not reaching what they're capable of reaching, and that's why it's really important. And
yes,
this,
that's
go ahead, Linda.
I said, yeah, that's what really have to be clear about. Boys, we're talking about boys who are capable of doing it. We're not here to undermine them. We're here to say, hey, factors around them are causing them to be underachievers. And what we want to help dads understand is what's what's happening and what you can do to kind of improve that achievement.
And as we talk about this whole idea of underachievement and so on, we've reduced the probability that boys, in fact, are going to, they're going to, we reduce the probability of them actually graduating from secondary school, but even worse, uh, we're reducing the probability of them going into some type of post-secondary education. And that's really critical because as we talk about, as our society increasingly moves to a knowledge-based society, um, people who aren't progressing through the school system are going to be increasingly handicapped. They're handicapped now, but it's nothing compared to how handicapped they're going to be 10 or 15 or 20 years from now.
And we've talked about before, the trades even require a high school diploma in most cases. So boys need this for their future. And in the economy is shifting, as Jim said, and you need this education to get ahead, to start a family, to support your family.
And evidence of the effect it's having is uh, traditionally, every year went by, more young people went on to post-secondary education and went further in school and so on. That's been a standard procedure. But now we're actually having a rising number of boys who leave secondary school and do not want to go back to school at all. And so the number of boys going on to post-secondary education, the percentage of boys going on to post-secondary education is declining. And that's a serious, serious problem. It's a problem now, but it's going to be a major problem in the coming years.
And definitely, and we all know AI is replacing the factory type jobs that is to employ a lot of men. And AI is having other impacts as well. So just to quickly review this again, this is a diagram we had last time in our podcast. We talked about all the influences that are on boys. So they're getting influenced by their parents, by the school system, and by society. And these are the three influences that impact how boys think about themselves and how they learn in return. So anything to say about this, Jim?
Yeah, one of the difficulties here is not only is school and society, if you'd like, handicapping boys, but the school unintentionally, I'll say, in fact, is influencing parents to believe that their boys can't succeed as well as they should, and that's a major, major problem, because where parents should have a lot of control over the school, in fact, the school has much more influence over parents. And these are things that we have to be conscious of as parents. I'm not saying we need a revolution or something, but I'm saying that we better be doing what we can to help our children, and in this case, boys, to achieve their capabilities, to do the things they're capable of doing.
So what do we need to do to better support boys?
Well, here we go.
There's 4 things that we're going to touch on today. Dads need to examine how they interact with their sons. How are you talking to your son? How do you interact with him? What things do you do with him? The education system, as we've said, needs to change. The philosophy of the education system also needs to be changed. We need to look at what the education system is and what we think it should be. And then dads need to know their rights to get involved in their son's education. So we're going to touch on each of these topics today.
Super. Let's roll on.
So on to dads. Why do dads need to change their perspective? And it's really important. Sons look up to their dads. It's really important that sons know their dads are there for them and supporting them. Again, we talk about dads. I just want to be clear. We talk about whether if there isn't a biological dad involved, a stepdad, an uncle, a grandpa, a nephew, some important male influence in the boy's life when we talk about dads. So here's some key questions if you're a dad out there to ask yourself. Do I spend
less time reading to and with my son than I do with my daughter? And do I say, no, I don't, I do the same? But then we better really take a serious look at it, because the fact of the matter is, in many cases, dads do spend less time reading to and with their sons than they do with their daughters. Do I have confidence in my son's academic abilities? Do I have less confidence in my son's academic abilities than I have my daughter's? And there's lots of evidence to suggest that, partly because of the message the school system is sending dads, that we end up with less confidence. Do I provide my son with less encouragement? Well, again, that seems to be a factor. Is my manner of dealing with my son helping or hindering his belief in himself and his personal development and a high aspiration for himself? And what am I prepared to do to counteract society's demeaning of men and boys? And again, I'm not talking about, okay, let's have a big revolution or change everything, but we need to look at the small things we do And as I've mentioned in the past, when I go to the store and I buy sporting goods for my sons and I buy books for my girls, I am sending a message to them. And it's subliminal, but it's significant. And I have to be careful that that's not what I'm doing. I have to take a serious look at it and see what I'm doing.
These are things, I guess, that dads automatically do or don't realize that they're doing. So next time you're interacting with your son or each time you interact with him, take a minute, listen to what you're saying to him and try and think about how that impacts him and how he feels. And what this does to how it's not just about how he's feeling, it's about his his ability to achieve things. Make sure he understands he has the ability, that you're proud of him, that he can do this, and then help him along on that path, find his passion, as we've talked about before, and help him work towards that.
We're not suggesting that dads have to give their sons more abilities. We're saying that dads have to encourage sons to recognize they have these abilities and to take the steps that are necessary to demonstrate those abilities and to achieve according to that. So moving on.
So the other thing is the education system. And so how would we design an education system for all students? Have it treat students in a more equitable manner. We're talking about equality here, not equity. So we want to make sure that students are treated in from an equality perspective. So here's some thoughts about what we think should be suggested or changed in the education system. Jim, do you want to go ahead with this?
You bet. So we have to recognize that all students aren't going to master exactly the same curriculum. And by curriculum, I mean all the learning opportunities are around them. So we have to recognize that they're going to learn things that interest them. They're going to succeed in things that interest them. And they're not all going to learn exactly the same. Boys and girls don't necessarily learn the same, partly because of the different experiences they've had growing up. Now, that's one thing that we need to recognize, that we need to allow people to explore different areas, and we can learn the same basic knowledge and skills, but we can do it differently by having different opportunities available to us. Now, one of the things that we do in our schools is we put everybody born in the same calendar year in the same grade. And that's a problem because some of those children could be as much as one full year older than others. And, as I say often, if I have two children and they're a year difference in age, do I expect them to be toilet trained at the same time? Do I expect them to speak at the same time? Do I expect them to walk or run at the same time? Well, of course, whenever I talk to a group of parents, they've said, of course not. How could anybody be so silly as to expect that? And yet we put children in school, we put them in classes based on that. And then we use things like the assessments of students to demonstrate that some of the children aren't at the same level that others are. Well, for one thing, they're not the same age. And so we need to recognize that. And we seem to be having difficulty with that. This is partly due to the way we do our teacher training, which needs a lot of work as well. Should all students be evaluated by the same methods? And obviously, no. Some children, in fact, don't process things as well auditorially. They don't hear. They hear all right, but the brain doesn't process the things the same as they do visually. So we have to recognize that we are going to have some different methods to evaluate students. And of course, to expect all to meet the same standards is outrageous. I mean, in all dimensions of life, we wouldn't expect that, but somehow we do with the school system. And if a student can't do it at this particular point because he hasn't matured to that level, should he or she be seen as a failure? And the answer is no, they shouldn't. And so we need to accept the idea that we need to start with students where they are and move them forward from there, and not expect them all to be doing exactly the same thing at the same time. So
One of the long-term proofs of this that you and I have chatted about before is if you look at a professional hockey team and look at their birth dates, and what do we find? Most of them are born in the early part of the year, right, Jim?
Yeah, yeah, they are, and research has been done on that in terms of hockey, and it starts when we do the research, we find it's true in the NHL and so on, but we also find out it's true in the junior hockey. It's also true in terms of pee-wee hockey, and that's because the older children the ones born at the beginning of the year can do more, are more capable because they're more mature. They end up getting more ice time, they get more coaching, they get to play more, and this carries on throughout hockey. And I say that to you because it's worth having a look at. And in my book, Rescuing Our Underachieving Sons, there's actually a section dealing with that. But it's also true, and they've done this study as well in the UK, where they looked at the premiership in football, in soccer, and sure enough, the ones born at the beginning of the time period that we use for putting students in our football players in leagues, the ones born at the beginning, of course, do better. And the result is that we see this disparity in terms of when people are born in that. So this is a real dilemma. And to add to that, what the research has shown us is that if a student has a birthday in November, for example, that student is 4 times as likely to be diagnosed with a learning disability than a child who's born in February. And a child born in December, 6 times as likely as one born in January. I'm not saying that parents should plan when their babies are born, but the school system has to look at the fact that the child's labeled as learning disabled because the child's not as mature. And unfortunately, once we label them, they stay labeled. So I think people have got to be very conscious of this. One of the studies I did when I worked in Hastings, Prince Edward, we looked at adjusting the program for students, not changing the starting dates or anything, but adjusting the program for them. And the school system went from having 11% on average, 11% of the students diagnosed with generic learning disabilities to 0.
Wow.
Just by adjusting the program. And so we could do that if we really wanted to. And but we have to, and as parents, we have to start being more demanding in terms of what the school is doing in terms of expectations and so on. So I bring that to your attention. It's really critical, really, really important. And if we don't deal with it, we're handicapping children tremendously.
That's really fascinating. I don't think parents would think about that at the time, but yes, now that we have JK, children that turn 3 in January and children that turn 3 in December, there's a big gap at that young age. And if they get labeled either by the school system or as a parent, you think, oh no, my son's not doing well. And you have to give them time to mature. You have to help them out and give them time to mature. And the system doesn't necessarily recognize this, as Jim just talked about. So just be conscious of that if you have boys born in the second half of the year.
Well, the last of these points is about medications, and the Danish government decided that it wanted to deal with the ADHD problem. So it took it invited organizations to send it ideas in terms of solving this problem. And I believe it was Stanford University that got the contract. And they tried a number of things, and they found a way to significantly reduce the number of young people identified as ADHD. In fact, over 70% reduction. And all they did was, believe it or not, all they did was have all the students start school a year later. In other words, that they would simply be more mature. And they
Wow.
reduced the number of students diagnosed as having ADHD by over 70%. And when you figure that in the United States right now, the number of boys identified as having ADHD in secondary school is 20%. That's a
Wow.
significant issue, especially when you reduce most of it simply by adjusting the programs we're giving children to deal with. And this is the research is clear on this. So we need to be looking at how we can adjust these things to make a difference in it. If I bring that to your attention and suggest you give us some thought, especially you dads, right?
So
Okay.
what would an education system look like that was designed for all students? What would we have to think about? And we've touched on some of this already. So we need to, there's different messaging for different students. So they all have different needs and interests. They all have different abilities that we just talked about for, perhaps age or other reasons. They have different learning styles, boys and girls, and it all depends. They're coming from different home environments too, depending on how parents spend time teaching their children or not at home, and they're all in different stages of development. So you'd have to design something for all of this. So as an example, Jim has a fable here for us, and I'll pass it over to you, Jim. Tell us the
Okay.
story.
Well, it's an interesting fable because it looks at, if we take this out of dealing with little boys and little girls, if we take it and we apply it in the animal kingdom, we have this story where the animals decided they were going to deal with all of this, so they elected a school board with a bear, a badger, and a beaver, hired a porcupine as a teacher, and the curriculum consisted of running, climbing, swimming, and flying. And of course, as would be the case in an Ontario school, here is the curriculum, and everybody is going to do the same curriculum. So all the students take all the animals, in this case, take all the subjects. Well, you don't have to be brilliant to figure out that while the duck is great at swimming, better than the porcupine, who was the teacher, not doing all that well in flying, and he's quite poor in running. So what do we do with a student who's isn't naturally endowed like that? Well, keep him after school. We have him drop swimming so he can spend more time practicing his running. Well, his web feet get badly worn out, and now he's not even that good at swimming. Have we helped him to succeed? No. The squirrel's excellent at climbing. However, he's not good in flying class. If you're familiar with flying squirrels, they're good when it's from the treetop and sailing down, not necessarily so good from the ground. And overexertion, and then he's not doing well in climbing or in running. And of course, in our school system, we'd have a problem student who doesn't seem to want to do any of these things, so we discipline him. Well, in the climbing class, the eagle beats all the others to the top, However, he doesn't use the same method to get there. He doesn't climb up the side of the tree. Rabbit, well, the rabbit spends all his time doing swimming and has a problem with it and ends up psychologically damaged. And naturally, you're going to get some homeschoolers in this. So the prairie dogs kept their young ones out of school, fought the tax levy. The administration would not add digging and burying to the curriculum. And they end up with homeschooling their children, and they start a private school. Well, you look at this and say, well, you know, you don't have to be brilliant to figure out these problems. Why do we not see it when we're dealing with how the school system works in terms of dealing with your children and my children? It's significant when I tell you that I was director of education of an Ontario school board, and if you talk to my wife, she would advise you, if at all possible, to homeschool. So unfortunately, the school system isn't always that great at meeting all kids' needs. So, Linda.
That is a great story, a great analogy of what's really going on. And it's very, very fascinating and really calls out how children are different, just like the animals have different skills and different abilities, and we don't necessarily see it, but you can really see it in this story, in this fable. It's like, really stands out. And, a way of looking at that is, and this happens, right, in school, kids have different ways of solving problems. And we've talked about this before. So they have different ways of solving the problems. And if one student gets the right answer, but they used a different method, not the method the teacher taught, maybe they used a different way of doing it, they get penalized, they get lower marks because they didn't use the exact same method that was taught in the class. And we were growing up, it was always show your work, and then the teacher could look through it and see, how did you really get there? Did you cheat or did you make this up? And this sort of thing that anybody would think, including the teacher, as well, how did you get the right answer? This is not the way I showed you how to do it. So maybe they have different abilities, like the eagle or the duck. They have a different way of doing things. They do it differently. As long as they get to the right answer and they understand how they got to the right answer, then we should be accepting that. And that's partly the outcome from the story here.
It certainly is. And it's very, very important that we recognize that people have different ways of learning. And because of the way we socialize our babies and our very young children, when they tackle a problem at school that they're given to solve, they aren't necessarily going to tackle it the same way. So we do see a difference in terms of how a group of girls get together to solve a problem than a group of boys. And I'm not going to flog that right now, but I'm going to say to you that it is very different, and this is not made up. It clearly is very different, and teachers have to recognize that. Unfortunately, women teachers are going to expect everyone to approach it the way girls approach it because they were girls. And men teachers very often are going to expect to approach it the way men approach it because they were boys. If the school system has a mix of teachers, you're going to get different views and different approaches. If it has only women teachers or only men teachers, now you're going to get a very distorted picture, and we're going to handicap one group. Okay, Linda, moving on.
Moving on. So how can we, how can the education system restore boys' economic power? Because really that's what we're talking about, because you're struggling in school. And as we've said, you don't get through to the end, that affects you lifetime, totally lifetime. So things we're talking about, how boys learn differently, or even, you have a different way of doing things. So things you need to look at is, let's try different ways of learning on hands, like live on hand experiential learning, not just reading to them, maybe, which is fine for some students. Other students need to see it. They need to touch it. They need to experience. We need to add more boys' adventure stories in the school. So that helps them, pay attention. Wait a minute, this is a story about boys. And we do have a list of suggested books for boys, with boys as the character, as the main character, as the hero. He sees a boy succeed, and then he can identify with that. And then use real world science examples that resonate with boys and girls. And we've talked about this in the past as well. This could be at primary school or all the way to high school. So when you're explaining parts of a flower, boys may not be interested in that, or maybe other students aren't interested in that. But talk about parts of an engine, then boys go, oh, they, not all boys, but some boys may say, oh, this is fascinating. And then they can go home and talk to their dads. And if they don't get that in school, like we've said before, boys, dads try and take a look at what they're learning. And then how can you apply it in real life for them so they can see, oh, okay, this just isn't some stupid thing I have to learn. Oh, that's why I need to learn it. So they need that help and support when they get home. The other thing is we need to teach boys emotional intelligence. So boys have the ability, it's innate in girls, so it stands out in girls, but not so much in boys, but they can learn it. They've done research, they've proven that boys can learn emotional intelligence. And this affects their economic opportunities. So when we mean those types of things, we mean sensitive to body language, tone of voice, hesitation patterns, eye contact, and knowing when to listen, when to talk, when to create spaces. Those are the kind of things when we say emotional intelligence, and that helps them with communication skills. It may help them in future in healthcare, teaching, the type of things, kind of hands-on or human interaction type skills that will be the future if AI, those are the jobs that AI can't take, that human contact. So it's important that we, this is one of the things we could teach boys, and girls could learn from it as well.
We need to encourage our boys to get into various areas of healthcare, nursing, and as well as social work and so on. And we need to encourage our boys to get into teaching because it's really, really critical. And when I talk to school boards about it, the school board administrators about it, they tell me, well, we can't hire more male teachers because they don't exist. Well, we've got to encourage boys to look into that. And yes, I understand that they have their concerns, but we need to restore the number of men teachers that existed 50 years ago. We need to bring that number back up again, and we do it by encouraging them to get involved in it.
And then, of course, we need to, as we said before, build boys' self-esteem and teach empathy in school. So this is all connected, right? Healthy relationships, how to do conflict resolution is really important because they don't get that from the social media at all. How to interact with people when you don't agree with them, when there's a conflict situation. What's the best way to resolve it? And then, of course, when you're in the work environment, you have to collaborate with other people and do teamwork.
And I encourage all of you. Sorry, Linda. I encourage all of you to read Warren Farrell's books. He's listed on here, and one of his books is The Boys Crisis. I encourage you to read Warren Farrell's books. Warren has been working on this, I think maybe as long as I have, and not to mention the fact he's my age, but his books certainly are worth reading, and they are very, very helpful. So putting in a plug for Warren.
Okay, so now let's talk about the philosophy of education. And you sort of think, well, why is this important? Well, the current philosophy in the education system requires parents to make sure you change your kids and get them ready for school. We talk about, oh, we got to get them ready for school. We got to buy this, we got to buy that. They got to think this way. And what that means when the school, as we've talked about, is feminized, it's teaching boys to be more like girls. But what we need to do is it should be the other way around. The education system, as we've just talked about, needs to change its method of operating so they can accommodate students, not only boys, but students, so they, that have been socialized a certain way by their parents. The system needs to accept the children, not force the children into a box. And as we've
And
mentioned, majority of teachers in the system, primary system specifically, are women.
so we need to give some serious thought to when we get to August and you go into uh, you go into a store like Walmart or wherever, and there are all kinds of magazines and books there, and they talk about getting your child ready for school. And of course, somewhere along the line here, that's, I hate to say it, but it's the method you appear to have to apply now. But maybe the school should be accepting the fact that children come the way they come. They don't come the way I necessarily want them to come. They come the way they come. And hey, I've got them. Now I've got to deal with it. So maybe it's the school system, maybe it's the education system, maybe it's teachers that need to be more willing to accept people the way they come. Because you know what? They come the way they come.
Exactly. So the last topic we're going to talk about is the Ontario law system. What does it say about parents' rights? Because this is important. So as you may not know, the common school system was originally created to be an extension of the parents' role as the primary educator of their children. Parents are the primary educator. Its role is to reflect the wishes of the parents in the educations of their children, not to tell parents how to carry out their parental responsibilities and how to socialize their children. It's parents' rights, parents' responsibilities. We have a couple of quotes here. Parents do not surrender their authority to the state when they entrust their children to a public school system. They remain the primary educators of their children. So dads, you need to remember this. Another quote, this is actually from the Legislative Assembly of Ontario in May 2023. There exists widespread unease that schools have become a kingdom unto themselves with little need to report to parents or to the world and whether they're doing it successfully. And that's a key problem. Someone to watch for on social media is Bruce Pardy. He's a law professor at Queen's University. He advocates for parents' rights and civil liberties, emphasizing that parents are the primary educators of the children. So remember that when someone starts telling you how to do something, because you are the primary educator.
And hence we have an increasing number of parents who are doing homeschooling. That tells you something.
Yes.
Moving right along, Linda.
So what does this mean for dads? Well, dads have the right and the responsibility to educate their sons. That's very important.
And communicate with the teachers. And remember that when it's not an interview situation. When you meet with a teacher, it's collaborative people. The teacher may be the expert on learning, but you are the expert on your child. And so you need to be exchanging what you know as equals.
So, pay attention to what's going on. If you're concerned about what's happening in the classroom, then escalate your concerns and issues with your son's education to get more effective support for your son. There are parent councils at your local school. You may want to join that, see what's happening in the local school. There is also, under the Education Act, something called the Parent Information Council. And if you go to the website for your local school board, there will be a section on Parent Information Council, and arrange to get emails from them. Find out what's the Parent Information Council doing, and do they have your son's best interest at heart, and what's going on. So pay attention to what's going on. The other thing is, if you're concerned about your boy's education, contact your local trustee. You elect them. It's the democratic system, at least for the moment, you elect them. Tell them what you're concerned about. Tell them what you want changed, because that's their job. Tell them what you think should be changed in the system. Contact the Minister of Education, send them an email, take 10 minutes, 5 minutes, write an email and say, hey, this is what's happening in my school. This is not right. This is a detriment to my son. And then be informed. There's a couple of websites to look at. The Parents' Rights Coalition of Canada. Look at prcoc.org. There's a lot of good information on there about parents' rights. It's about what's happening in the school system. They've had 3 online conferences, and the videos are all there if you want to watch them. They're all available. Protectliteracy.ca tells you what's going on. Well, the books that your son's reading, that'll be a time for another topic for another day. But take a look at that, see what's happening in the school system. And there's news feeds on there as well as to what's going on. And so know what your son's learning in school. Find real life application to inspire him to learn. Learning is a wonderful thing. But if you're made to learn something you don't like, that makes it hard. So, and there's going to be things that they don't like. Go ahead, Jim.
Well, I'm going to look at this last one. It's really, really important that we help young people, boys particularly in this case, to make sure they have top-notch reading skills. And that includes critical thinking, but it's also the difference between decoding the words on the page and, in fact, knowing, understanding what is written there. So it's critical, and it's critical. I'm saying this, it's critical for our life skills throughout our lives. Moving along, Linda.
So what's next? Well, join us and find out. We always have interesting topics. And if you want a topic, Jim's very knowledgeable. Request a copy of his book, and he'll mail it to you free of charge. And it has more detail than, of course, what we talk about in the podcast, along with research to back up the things that we are saying on the podcast. But if there's a topic you want to talk about, let us know. If there's a guest you want us to have on our podcast, let us know. We're looking for adding guests, dads, and other people involved in the education system, or dads that are having issues with their sons. So feel free, reach out, and tune in next time to see what we're going to talk about.
Right. Thank you very much, Linda. I'm really impressed. Good job.
Okay, thanks, Jim. We appreciate all the hard work you've done over the years and the research you've done to support all this information to help boys and men succeed. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye, everybody.